Hey, and welcome to FitMitTuro Fitness Podcast, a podcast for people who want to get no BS information about fitness and know that fitness is about so much more than losing scale weight. It's about feeling confident in your skin and empowered in your life. I'm your host, Turo Virta, personal trainer, strength and nutrition coach, and most of all, a husband of my beautiful wife, Miriam. Each week, my guests and me will give you some no BS fitness tips and motivate you to take action in your own personal fitness journey as we talk about nutrition, exercise, mindset, personal development, and executing in life with enjoyable but still effective strategies. If your goal is to look better, feel and be strong and experience transformation from inside out, you, my friend, are in the right place. Thank you for jumping in, and now let's jump into today's episode. Hey, and welcome to FitMitTuro Fitness Podcast. Today's episode, I have a guest, James LeBaigue, who is actually part two. We did earlier last year in November, part from endurance eating and more about nutrition stuff. Like episode is called Endurance Eating, Mastering Carbs, Calories and Recovery. So this is part two, where we are talking with James about training principles, about to endurance and sports, and in general, maybe we have time to touch a little bit also nutrition part, but mainly this is going to be about training. So welcome to the show, and good to see you again, James. So if you don't mind, tell a little bit shortly about yourself. Obviously, most of the people who have listened to episode earlier know about you, but just give a little introduction, who you are, what you are doing.
Yeah, certainly. And nice to speak to you again, Turo. I really enjoyed the last one, so I've been looking forward to coming and chatting to you again. So my name's James LeBaigue, and I'm a registered sports nutritionist and also work as an advanced clinical practitioner in the NHS, so in family medicine. And within sports nutrition, I work with Hurry the Food Up. I'm the head of nutrition there, and I have my own company, Nutrition Triathlon, and I work with amateur and endurance. Amateur and professional endurance athletes. So I have a bit of a kind of varied role in terms of what I do, but it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. So let's jump right into topics what we wanted to cover. And first, what I wanted to talk with you about is introduction to endurance training. So what are the foundational principles of training for runners and endurance athletes?
I think the first thing that I would say is it's always important to start your training based on your previous experience. So by that, I mean, if you're an experienced runner, you're an experienced kind of athlete, whether you're a cyclist, whether you do something different, you have to just make sure that you come in at the level that's appropriate for you. Because I think one of the mistakes that I will see with beginner runners is there's often a lot of motivation and they really want to get involved. They want to run lots, and it's this cool thing. You have to just make sure that actually load is the biggest thing. So I know we briefly talked about it last time, but volume is a really big thing. So just making sure that actually you start at the bottom and kind of gradually build up. And one of the biggest things that I would say, and this is for people who are beginners or advanced, is prioritize most of your time to easy endurance training rather than lots of high intensity training. So again, that's something which I very commonly see is people do lots of high intensity training because they feel that that's the kind of thing that makes everything work, that makes them get better at their training, whatever it is that they want to do. So they'll do lots of hard efforts and often feel really kind of battered and smashed afterwards. Whereas actually, we know that probably the more important thing is lots of easy endurance training where, for example, you can breathe fully as you're training, as you're running. And that's more important because it gives you a big aerobic base. And that's kind of what everything else is built on. So if you improve that, then everything else can improve as well. So you think of that as kind of the foundations of your training, and the rest are the kind of building upwards. And it's like the icing on the cake, so to speak, of how to actually improve. So yeah, start slow, start with lower mileage, lower kilometers, and with easy work. And then as you become more experienced, you start building that up. And realistically, you don't see much difference in terms of the professionals in what they do. It's just that they're able to do more of it proportionally because they've built up to be able to do 20 or 30 hours of training. But actually, it's that same sort of split. You'll find most of them, it's just lots of easy miles, lots of easy training with smaller amounts of high intensity, harder efforts in it.
Oh, that's and that is something what I see and feel also. If I think back when I was younger, I was kind of chasing that feeling, like that if somebody, like if I decided at some point to go for a run, I was from my background, I come from ice hockey, and it was always like that to be a good workout, it have to feel hard, or you have to feel it in your body. And I think that is something like that, what most people, when they start for running or whatever exercise, that it have to feel, that you have to feel tired after. And for most of the people, especially beginners, like you said, that it's then that they feel it too much, what is preventing them to do it more often. Is that something
absolutely.
what you find also what you have seen working with the people?
Yeah, for sure. And don't get me wrong, high intensity exercise and working hard is really good. We know it's good for you from a cardiovascular metabolic health point of view, but it also feels great. I would be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy those hard workouts. I mean, enjoy at the time, maybe not. But there is a sense of satisfaction with it. And it's almost that if you're doing the easy training, it almost feels too easy and actually like you're not doing any work. So it's actually quite a hard thing to talk to people about and say, no, you're still going to be getting a lot of benefit from this and it's really good for you. It's a bit of a mindset shift, but once people understand that, it's fine. And realistically, it's a different kind of enjoyment. So you get the enjoyment of high intensity exercise and working hard, but actually you can have enjoyment with easy running. You go out for 60 minutes easy. And when you've built up to that, I can promise it feels absolutely wonderful to go out running, explore the countryside or something else around you, maybe that you don't normally go to, but you can run, you don't feel exhausted. And by the end of it, you get home and you feel amazing. And so it's just like a different kind of thing. And for me, the biggest thing with anything, whether it's you're looking for performance, whether you're looking at weight loss or just staying healthy, is doing it consistently over time. And what you generally find, especially with beginners, is if you don't have those foundational principles and actually build up to it, you're way more likely to get injured, or you follow too strict a diet and you're more likely to stop it because it's too hard. So it's actually just working out what's going to be better for consistently training, consistently staying active over time.
So in like basically that consistency beats that perfection, kind of what everybody is talking about, and this is it's exactly the same principle for running, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what are like typical mistakes, like how to know, like when that intensity is getting too much, or if you are like completely beginner, like what are kind of signs, what you like, if you think like that, what is that between the training intensity and volume, like what is the optimal for that, and what kind of, like, if you a runner who want to start running more, and what kind of signs your body is telling that when it's getting too much, because those things I feel often they are really hard to recognize by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, they are. So what I would say, if I'm working with someone, before we actually kind of start getting into things properly, and I would urge anyone to do this themselves when they're coming up with a running goal or triathlon or whatever it is they want to do, work out why they want to do it. And with that, work out what is going to make it fun. The reason I say this is we think about discipline, we think about motivation and staying consistent. And all of that is fine. But if things are too hard, either you are going too hard too frequently, you don't enjoy it, you're not prioritizing things like sleep, what happens is motivation, willpower, discipline become, I guess, more important, but also you're less likely to stick to it because you're relying on those things. Mm-hmm. So what I suggest, first of all, is finding fun with your exercise. So pick something which you, on the most part, can enjoy and actually look forward to doing, because then not only does that mean you're more likely to stay consistent over the long term because you're enjoying your exercise, which actually is going to then reduce the need for motivation, for discipline, for willpower, because actually it's not really a struggle. It's something that you can look forward to. And then you can use that fun and enjoyment as a metric for how hard your exercise is or how you're doing. Because if you have that goal of actually, when I started, it was really fun, and then you get a couple of weeks in or you get 2 months in and you find fun isn't there, then that's a really good way of saying, okay, what's changed? What's wrong? So is it then that I'm going too hard? Is it that I'm not eating enough, sleeping enough? Those sort of things, which actually might, or I would use it as a prompt to review your training, review your running, and see where you're at. So that's a really nice way, I think. Then you're looking at other metrics. Now, lots of people nowadays have fitness apps that they track things on. So they track things like their heart rate, they track things like their sleep, their heart rate variability, those sort of things. They can give a good indication. So if you find, for example, that your sleep starts going off, that you're not able to sleep as much and you're getting this decline in your sleep, that might be a really good warning sign. If people track their heart rate variability and that starts going off, again, that's just something to prompt you to say, hey, things might need changing, might need looking at. And then things like general recovery. So are you actually feeling well recovered and ready for your next session? Do you feel like you've always got DOMS, so muscle soreness, or that you're picking it up aches, niggles, pains that don't seem to be settling down? Mm-hmm. Basically, you're absolutely right in that it's really difficult because there is not one thing that you can reliably say, this is something that you need to watch out for. It's more trying to understand that overall holistic way of seeing your training, your exercise, and kind of setting some markers. And another really useful thing, if people are interested, is using an app, and there's a variety of ones out there that ask you a daily questionnaire in the morning. Mm-hmm. So then you can do things like track your heart rate variability. So you get an objective measurement, but then it will ask you subjective questions as well. So it will be like a score out of 10. How motivated do you feel to train today? How well recovered do you feel? How much energy do you have? And it's those sort of questions. And then again, what you get is a trend. And then you can see actually over time, is my trend starting to go down? I'm routinely not as motivated. I don't want to do it. And that's basically your guide, is using all of this data, because we have so much data nowadays, but actually if you don't use it correctly, it's not really worth using.
Mm. Would you mind, like, I find it personally, I love my sport tracker and watching like kind of recovery, like there are different kind of brands, but if you see your heart rate variability, like, because there is something like that, what if you have a sport watch, you might have that in your phone or you see that statistic, but most of the people have no idea what it means. Would you mind explaining a little bit, like how it affects and what kind of values or what you are looking for, how to, like, if you try to track these kind of metrics, that where to pay attention?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so heart rate variability, to explain it. So your heart beats, let's say on average, 60 times a minute. Although when you look at it, most people will have a regular rhythm. So it beats maybe every second or every second and a half. Within that, there's variability. So it might be every 1.3 seconds and then every 1.7 seconds. So you have that change. Now, that change or that variability is good and it's normal. because you have two areas of your nervous system called your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. And that's, if you've ever heard of fight or flight, those are your systems. Now, when you're in a good rested state, so by rested, I just mean you're not overstressed, you're not overworked, your parasympathetic nervous system is kind of in control or has more control. That means you have a greater heart rate variability. So it has this ability to fluctuate in terms of how fast it beats. And that's good. And we want that because it means that your body is able to adapt and change. When your sympathetic nervous system starts to take over, it's a sign essentially that you are more stressed. Now, stressed, I mean that in a physiological sense. So your body is just under more stress. You have more stress hormones going on. Mm-hmm. And there might be loads of different reasons for that. So that might be stress in the way that most people think about it. So daily job stress, work stress, financial, whatever it is, that adds in. And then you have training stress. So you're putting your body under load and it's having to recover. Or it might be things like you're not sleeping as well. All of that adds to this physiological stress. As your body and your sympathetic system takes over and is kind of more active than your parasympathetic, you find that your heart rate variability goes down. Mm-hmm. And so we see that in someone's heart rate variability. Now, everyone's heart rate variability is completely different. So most people will get something like an overnight heart rate variability score, and then they get an average. There's different research into how useful it is, and probably, so I would caveat with all of this that I'm not an expert in heart rate variability. If you want to look at some of the people on Twitter, the chap who created Heart Rate for Training, which is a really, really good tool. I'm not sponsored or affiliated, but it's very good. He has lots of useful info about this. But everyone's heart rate variability is different. And what you're trying to look out for is trends, because you can get sudden changes in your heart rate variability and it might not be significant at all. So there's some really good research that suggests that actually short-term changes in heart rate variability, so for example, on the day, doesn't correlate with performance. You can still perform very well. But again, it's one of these tools that you can use as a trend and a guide. So if you use something like a heart rate variability tracker, you track it every morning and you notice over a couple of weeks of hard training, it's going down. There's an element that's kind of expected. But if alongside that, your subjective measures, like you're finding your motivation is down, you're not feeling as recovered, that then gives you more of an understanding and more pieces of data to actually say, I need to address this in my training, or I need to address something in my life. Maybe I'm training too much. Maybe my work stress is too high. It's basically a way of kind of measuring that stress. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is like what I find in this kind of like, because I love to look those kind of things, and like you said, that it's more important is like, because many people, you know, like if they, for example, many people, if they wake themselves in the morning, you look at, holy shit, I gained weight. Or if you look for example, it's same thing. If you look heart rate variability, like, and one day you didn't sleep well and it's a low, and now if that most of the people think that, oh fuck, I gained weight, so I have to restrict myself. I won't eat anything, or I will punish myself with the workout. Or it's same thing with the heart rate variability, that I feel like that you have to, like you said, that learn to recognize those trends. And one bad day doesn't mean that it's not worth of working out. But if you see, like, if I look now my sport tracker, I see like that I don't know what those numbers mean. I understand that a higher number I have, better recovered I am. I looked at my numbers are like from average from past 28 days. What my watch is giving is 69, and last night I had 78. So I feel like, and today I know I slept well. I feel full. I was just before we started this podcast, I was working out, and I felt like really good about it. And I know that on the other days, if I didn't for some reason sleep so well, obviously my workouts, they are not going to be the best ones, but I still do them, even I might not be able to use as heavy weights or to push myself really as hard as I would if my recovery and sleep have been better. But this is basically just to understanding like those principles and trends where they are going, and if what is actually happening in your life, and not to like think those single values to justify for something what you probably already know. But it's like you said, it's very well explained. So I know you are not expert in this, but is there, like you said, is there some kind of values? What you consider are like normal values or good values, or do you have knowledge about it, like what it should be, or is it just so individual that you basically you need only look where you are and trying to kind of improve that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with heart rate variability, it's just so individual. It's not worth comparing. Like you can look at the data and see averages where you are compared to the rest of the population, but it means nothing. It's your individual physiology. You tend to find that more athletic people and the fitter someone is, the higher their heart rate variability, but it's still individual to them. And as we age, our heart rate variability drops as well. So you have to just be careful, because you could be a really fit, healthy 60-year-old. And if you compare that to an unfit 30-year-old, they might still have a higher heart rate variability. One, because they're younger, but two, just their individual physiology. Now, that's where it's just quite dangerous with having all of these tools and all of these metrics, but not necessarily knowing how to deal with them. And I think there's two things there. One is that you end up just doing the wrong thing. So the example you gave of weight is a really good one. So someone sees that their weight has gone up that day, and instead of sticking to their plan, because we know it's more about the trend, they decide to restrict food. And actually that's a really negative mindset and causes problems. But it's exactly the same with something like heart rate variability. But also, I think it has the ability to really get into your head. And as a personal example to this, I actually don't wear my Garmin watch anymore at night, because mine gave me a report every morning. And I'm quite a mental person, and I like numbers and data, but I can also get quite fixated on it. And if I woke up in the morning and my Garmin told me I'd had a bad night's sleep, sometimes, and this is where it is really interesting, because the overnight trends aren't necessarily as helpful. It's more likely to be useful for as soon as you wake up to do a minute tracking, or at that point when you wake up. So the overnight one might not even be that helpful. But for me, I find that actually really distracting and kind of dangerous, because then I'm like, am I unwell? What's wrong with this today? And I was even getting to the point that at night, I would wake up in the night and go for a pee, or I'd roll over in bed and think, oh no, my Garmin's going to be tracking this. It knows that I woke up, and it knows that I didn't sleep that well, and it's going to affect my heart rate variability score. And that is so stupid, but it's just the way my brain works. And I know from speaking to other people and athletes I've worked with that can be a problem for them as well. And if it's not, and actually you're fine with it, then great. And it's kind of more evidence or more data that you can use. But I think we've got to be really careful. And it's one of those things as well, like with social media, that you compare yourself, or you start looking into things too much, and it has the potential to just really negatively impact you when it shouldn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so interesting, like that sleep is something like what I learned so much from Dr. Shelby Harris. I just recently posted that podcast episode. So if you are listening this, I think it's 2 episodes before this episode was about sleep. And she mentioned exactly the same things like you mentioned, that many people, if you find yourself that, it brings you more stress with these all kind of trackers and everything, don't use them. Like but they are, because they are, first of all, they are not very accurate. Like it's all sport trackers. they obviously in their marketing, they are telling that they are the most accurate and whatever. But if you look, for example, calorie burn, they are overestimating so much. Like I think studies show like 26 to 97% about amount of calories. So you feel better about yourself. It might motivate for someone to do more sport, but if you, on the upper side, if you use it as a reason that now I have burned this amount of calories, I can eat this much, and then you might not be actually seeing results what you thought you should be seeing because your sport tracker wasn't very accurate. And it's the same thing with the sleep. They are not 100% accurate. So basically the only thing to be really accurate is to go put yourself in a like a whole mask and everything put it in your heart monitor, but that is something like that you might want to do for a couple of days or maybe for a week, but not using in a daily life. So be careful with all these tracking tools, and if they are like distracting you, it's better not to use it. And it's a good example is from my work. Like when I work as a strength coach for Italian hockey team, and I know I'm from Finland. In Finland, top ice hockey team, there was an interview, and they said that during the tournament, like when you play for World Championships for a week or two, most people that they don't even want to players tracking their sleep or recovery because it's when it's so short, it's useful tool if you use it like let's say in your when you are working out. But if you have like some kind of competition like ice hockey world championships for a week, it doesn't bring you any value to know, like if players know, if somebody is telling that, like you said, that now I'm not recovered, I didn't sleep well, so it means that I'm tired. And then, you start to think it even more, and even you might not actually feel tired, but when watch is telling that, oh, like I'm not fully recovered, I must be tired. And then more you kind of start to think about these things, more it starts to affect. So it's really, with all these tools, they are great, but depending how you are using them, and not to give like kind of too much value on everything.
Yeah, it's why I like the subjective ones as well, the ones which are that will ask you questions, absolutely. Because then you kind of can pit it against how you genuinely feel, and I think then you get a good balance of objective and subjective data.
Absolutely. So when it comes now, this is a good bridge to go over about periodization. Like what kind of role, like if you like, this is just, it could be for example, for you feel like that, okay, you have been probably doing too much, or just in general, even everything is going perfectly, you are recovered well, but what kind of role like that periodization play in endurance training?
Okay, I'd start by saying there is very mixed opinions on this, and actually mixed evidence in terms of how useful periodization is. Now, my opinion on it is that periodization is good in the sense of having a split between high intensity and low intensity. So I mentioned it earlier, but I like to think of something like a 90 to 10% split, or an 80-20. You'll see those sort of numbers around. So 80-90% of your training is easy, 10 or 20% of your training is hard. And that gives you a good balance of doing all of the easy endurance work, which works on your aerobic system, your fat metabolism, and essentially sets the base for all your training. And then you do the hard stuff, which kind of adds that final extra bit. Then there's a kind of bigger periodization question there. And certainly in endurance sports like triathlon, there's the periodization over the year. So we've got periodization on a micro scale of like your daily workouts or your weekly workouts. And then we've got a macro scale thinking about our workouts over a couple of months. What you typically see is in the winter period, people focus even more on base, easy training. So over the winter months, you'll find they do lots more easy exercise. And this is in general, lots of easy exercise, lots of long training as well, just focusing on that easy stuff. Then as the season progresses and you start getting closer to race season, start to add in more high intensity and more tough work around what we call race pace. And then once you're into specifically the race season, you do far more around race specific stuff. So you make sure at that point that whatever point you've got to, you're targeting that in your training. So you, for example, with cycling, we have watts, or with running, you have pace, but you're trying to train at what you expect to be doing your races at. So for an Ironman, you know that you might be trying to cycle at 200 watts or 240 watts. You would do intervals in your race specific sessions, which mirror that to get your body used to it. So your muscles adapt to that. You mentally know how tough it feels. But then also you practice things like your nutrition, because you have to make sure that you're practicing at race pace with your nutrition to see whether you can tolerate it okay, whether you need to change it, or whether you can up it. So those are the kind of periodization themes. Now, some people will think that actually you just do the same thing over the whole year, pretty much, in that you do that 80-20 split over the whole year. And yes, you might change kind of with the high intensity exercises, you might change the focus of them. I know we briefly touched upon this last time when we spoke, but you have different areas of your fitness to target. So you have your VO2 max, which is essentially your top end. And then you have something called your aerobic and your anaerobic threshold. So people might be best working at different parts of those. Whereas some other people and other coaches will think that very much, and for example, if you get to race season, you might do far more work at the high intensity range and the harder range, and a lot less at the lower easy end. And quite honestly, from my experience, my preference is to do that sort of 80-20 mix over the whole year and maybe target different areas that you're weaker at. And I think that probably leads to better results and is less likely to cause burnout and fatigue, and not necessarily kind of increase the high intensity work that someone does.
So this is we talked about this last time, but just briefly, like if someone is really beginner and doesn't understand what it like, if you are talking about 80-20 principle or 90-10, but then they're like that, what the hell I should be doing? Like I try to go to run 3 times a week. I have 1 hour time. That's my goal, to run 3 hours per week. So what this principle would mean in that kind of, for that kind of person, like let's say that you have 3 hours time and you want to follow this 80-20 principle, because what I see that most people, when they start to run and their goal is to run, let's say 3 times a week for an hour, they just go always same route with same speed that they feel tired after. And then that's their like running workout.
Okay, so if we, first of all, I'd go back to what we spoke about at the start, which is I think that most people need to understand why they are training, and, for example, for fun. So all of these things I'm talking about are kind of trying to optimize your training and, for example, your running. If someone in their goal is just to run 3 times a week, you have to look at where they are in their training and if they're a beginner, because this sort of thing might actually be too much for a beginner. Because actually what would be far more important is they just get out and run 3 times a week. They get out there and they enjoy it, whatever it is they do, whether they go slow, whether they go fast. Reduce that barrier, get them out the door, and then work on optimizing, getting an 80-20 split. But let's say, for argument's sake, they want to optimize, and ideally I would say it is worth it because it reduces the risk of injury and illness. 80-20, literally do it as a percent. So your 3-hour example, so they're running for 180 minutes. So 20% of that would be 36 minutes.
Yeah.
that's your high intensity period. So you're essentially trying to accumulate 36 minutes of high intensity work, and then maths, 140, 144 minutes of low intensity work. So if you want to kind of really break it down, that's how you do it. And it doesn't have to be exact. Like we're not aiming for absolute perfection. It's just, it gives you a good rule of thumb to say, okay, well, look, I did my high intensity workout earlier in the week. These ones can just be easy, and I'm focusing on that easy part.
Yeah, no, this is, I love this. Like, but what is if I would put it even more simple, like we talked about zone training, like if you have a sport watch or something like that, let's say now I put it a little bit like, if let's say 30 minutes from 3 hours would be high intensity work, 2.5 hours would be zone 2 training. So basically zone 2 training is something, if you have a sport watch, it's on zone 2, what feels relatively easy. It feels for most people that it's too less to be effective if they think like what their mind is telling, but it's something that you are, if you don't have sport tracker or anything, it's something that you are able to talk, but you don't want to be talking all the time, but you are able to make, let's say, 12 to 15 word sentence without taking a breath. And this is kind of that 2.5 hours, and then that 30 minutes is something like what is really hard, like interval training or something. And this is like a lot more effective, like you said, instead of just going 3 times a week for running, like kind of what most people do, like kind of zone 3, that they feel tired after, they might get sore, and often it leads that you at some point you lose motivation. You don't want to be doing it more often. Even some people still enjoy it, but that is I think, I don't know, do you agree? Like this kind of, I try to put things as simple as I can. So
yeah, no, I think that's good. And actually, because a lot of people do actually track their heart rate and know that. And I think you said 2 things which are really important. One, it's often so easy that it doesn't really feel like work. That's, you're probably in that right zone, or you can breathe properly and actually have a conversation if you needed to. You're not kind of panting. No, I like to think of it as being able to breathe in fully through your nose. That tells you you're in the roughly the right zone. And in terms of heart rate, again, so individual, but probably under about 65-70% should be that zone 2 easy sort of work. Then from about 70 to 80-85% is a bit of a middle ground, might be useful for certain scenarios. And we talked about race specific pace, that might be where that falls in. But anything above kind of 80-85% of your maximum heart rate, I would class as high intensity training. So I have some friends who still only think that high intensity training is if they go to like 95% of their maximum heart rate or above, and anything below that is still easy training. So there'll be that exact issue of they're running at like 85% of their maximum heart rate, and it feels pretty hard, but they aren't totally exhausted afterwards. But they're just as much as they might read or listen or hear, they just don't really understand that difference.
Yeah, no, well said. That's it. Don't have to be that hard. Like some people, not most, but some people are trying to kind of push themselves too hard. And like you said, that this is just an example. And for most people, like that kind of interval training, like you said, that this was now from 3-hour example, 30 minutes would be 20%. And even if you get that 10%, like 50 minutes in, that is still pretty good for especially for beginners or something. But just some kind of it could be a combination like 30-second sprints or 45-second sprints and repeating for let's say 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and that is actually what makes huge difference for someone, especially in the beginning if you have never done it before.
Yeah, and also linking it back to earlier what we're talking about, heart rate variability. So there's a good kind of parallel here with those times where you're just running and you're kind of running kind of hard, but not necessarily full out, full like you're not going as hard as you could, but you're not going easy. those are the sort of people that will find that their heart rate variability will just drop over time because they are constantly stressing their body. They're not going really hard, but they're not going really easy. And they're just constantly adding that bit of stress. They're not giving themselves time to recover. And those are the people you typically see. They don't actually improve anywhere near as much as they want to. And that's just because they're not having this sort of polarization. They're not giving themselves time to recover. And then also what you find there is they don't go hard enough when they're meant to be. And that's because they're tired, they're sore, they're not recovered, which means when they come to do their high intensity session, or what they class then as their high intensity session, they're already tired. So they just don't get that variation.
Yeah, wow, that's so good. Well said. Like how to use actually that kind of metrics to see, because it's really hard. Like if you don't know about this, and because this is like if you just kind of listen your body, or it's almost always like that your body might be telling totally different, which is very hard to actually understand. And then your mind is telling that I need to do it. Like if you are thinking like that, you need to you have a lot of discipline, you are pushing yourself even harder, and your body is telling already for long that now it's time to take it a bit easier. And this is it's a good example of what you just said. So for next, I wanted to talk a little bit about strength training and for endurance sports, because I see that this is something what most endurance athletes are missing, or they don't do a lot. So why first of all, why strength training is crucial for runners and endurance athletes?
I think a good place to start is, as you say, a lot of people don't do it, but it's slightly kind of, I guess, irritating because we probably want a clear black and white answer, but it's not necessarily beneficial. Now, I think it is, and I would generally encourage people to do it. But you do see examples of very, very, very good runners and triathletes who don't do any strength training. And of course, the question there is, could they be better if they do strength training? And unfortunately, we just don't really know because we can't. It'd be great if we had an alternative world where that person was strength training and we could see. But there's probably a benefit to it in that it helps to develop muscle and it helps to develop strength, stability, and certainly with running, that's really important to make sure that we've got muscles and stability in our knees or in our glutes, in our bum. So I think it is beneficial, but I think it's fair to say that there's probably, again, an individual element to it where some people will likely get far more benefit than others with it, because you will just see this that there's a real change. But I think in the most part, it's probably useful, and it's more useful for beginners, certainly. If you've always been someone who's athletic and you've kind of always used your body, and perhaps you're a club swimmer, that's always been something you do, then it's likely you probably have a strong core. You probably actually are doing pretty well. And perhaps the benefit is less compared to someone if you pick up sport in your middle age and you've never had much of a history of it. It's probably far more beneficial there because you will start to develop and use muscles which you never have. And so the bum and the glute muscles is a really good one. So one of those contributes to your knee stability. And if you're someone who's sedentary, you've never really done that, then actually you might be much more prone to getting knee injuries because when you run, because you've just never developed those muscles. So there's that individual element, but it can help.
Yeah, no, because this is something like, obviously I'm not working with endurance athletes like you do, but I just see with like kind of normal people who even their goal is to improve their endurance and cardio, adding some kind of like at least one strength training. I'm not telling that some whose goal is to improve cardio or heart health should be strength training like 3 to 4 times per week, but just kind of thinking it like that, at least at one session per week, like kind of like even for, because that's what, like you said, that it's so beneficial, because even you necessarily won't, you are doing okay even you don't do it, let's put it this way, but how much more you are able to see like what kind of results, because you are still using those muscles. And if you think like a running or cycling or whatever, like endurance sport, it's often a very repetitive movement. It's similar movement every single time, and it's if you don't do anything, if you do only that one thing, it's very hard for your body and for also for your muscles. So if you like, it's you might get injured, like you mentioned, if you don't do some kind of stability work for your knees, and in the end, you need, obviously, goal is not to become a bodybuilder, because that too much muscle mass is not necessarily beneficial. But if you do that one session per week, it's not that with that you are basically going to maintain it, and maybe in the beginning you might see some kind of difference, but you are going to maintain your muscle mass and work with all muscles, and things like doing like, it's then about exercise selection. If for runners, you do some lunges or walking lunges or carrying some weights or doing some just basic movements that are strengthening those muscles what you need, because endurance training, as it's not necessarily when you use those muscles, it's not you are not getting a lot stronger actually by doing it. So, and this is something like what I hear from people who, like normal people, if they go, we have here a lot of mountains, they go for a hike or some hilly hill, and they are earlier, they were so tired of doing it. Now, just with the strength training, even they haven't worked really their endurance that much, but they feel so much stronger when they can actually go for a walk to the hill, when they have stronger body and stronger legs.
Definitely. And you actually mentioned a few really good points, which I think it would be good to expand on. So one of them was about the benefits of strength training. And actually, that's probably really important to say, in that, coming back to the kind of why do people exercise, most of us aren't going to be professional athletes. We might have a goal. We might want to improve. We might want to get better. But actually, we also want to just stay healthy, and especially stay healthy later on in life. So if we're looking at pure performance, I think there are question marks as to how useful strength training is for endurance athletes. It might be depending on that individual, because actually they might benefit from putting on some muscle and then actually being able to convert that in various forms to performance. But most of us, performance is kind of secondary, so to speak. So we want to stay healthy, and having muscle and having muscle mass is definitely really important for that. It affects our heart health, affects our ability to use sugar, and we know it's really useful. But also, if we're thinking as we're getting on in life as well, it's harder to maintain or grow muscle. And actually, if we start that process earlier on in life and we continue that, that's really important. And, nowadays we're living longer, but quality of life doesn't necessarily always correlate with that. Yet muscle and having muscle is one of the biggest things for longevity, staying independent. So we have something called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle wasting or muscle shrinking. We want to reduce that as much as possible. So actually, when you kind of weigh it out, strength training is probably really useful for those people and all of us to just stay healthy as we get later on in life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like I can't tell it enough. Like it's most of us, we think we have our own beliefs, like what we think that this is the right way. I have never done it. I don't need it. Why should I be doing it? But the best way how I can address it is that just try it. Try what kind of difference it makes. I could give studies, you can give studies, we can talk as long as we want to try to kind of tell someone to do it, but if you never try it yourself, it's just to try it for a month and see what kind of difference it makes. Or maybe you would need a bit longer, because first month, to be honest, if you start strength training, first workout, you just need to look weights or look to do some kind of exercises, and you might be sore as you have never done it. Second time, it's going to be a bit easier. You still feel some soreness, but from usually what I have seen is from third time, your body is getting used to it. You start to adapt it, and then things are getting easier. So just give it a shot and see what kind of difference that is making, and having some kind of, for example, full body workout for once in a week, even for endurance athletes, even because this is something like if kind of periodization, what we talk for athletes, it's not only about athletes. I talk now about general population who don't have maybe they want to even run for a marathon or improve kind of everything. It's to not try to do everything or at the same time. Like you can always walk, you can do something, but putting that kind of building it, like it makes a lot more fun. First of all, if you do it, like, let's say for 2 months or 3 months, you focus on improving your endurance. Then next 2-3 months, you put focus on strength training. Then next month you can focus on something else, but just kind of focusing on different things and not necessarily to try to do everything at the same time, because then it feels overwhelming, and most people, they think that they should be doing so many things, but they can't. And then also your body, like we think what your body is seeing, like it's so different signals what you are telling to your body. So focusing one thing at a time, and putting even like when focus is on endurance training, put it that strength for maintenance, and even one session per week is more than enough to maintain everything. And then, or it's on the opposite, if you focus on building strength, putting that cardio kind of on maintenance, and focusing, for example, simply just walking, what is relatively easy and still you have all the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, James. That went so fast. Our hour is full. We didn't even have time to. I wanted to talk a little bit about nutrition, but I think we covered that everything on our last episode. So make sure you listen that. And now, if someone is interested, or obviously I hope you are, because you should definitely check James out. You have amazing articles about nutrition, and also about training. So tell where people can find you, how to connect with you.
Sure. So I'm on Hurry the Food Up and hurrythefoodup.com for all social handles. And that's a vegetarian website. We have lots of different recipes, meal plans for fitness and for weight loss. So go check us out there. And then also Nutrition Triathlon, and again on all handles, and nutritiontriathlon.com. And I have a YouTube channel with lots of free nutrition videos to help you with things like marathons, half marathons, that sort of thing. So yeah, come check us out.
Oh, awesome. I will put all links to show notes, so make sure you check those show notes for all links, and be sure to share some love. We would love to hear from you. So tag us on Instagram story, or if you haven't leave any 5-star review, I would really appreciate it, as those are really, really helpful. I don't have any sponsors for this show, but those 5-star reviews are helping a lot. And to get some feedback, what you thought, what were your biggest takeaway, let us know in Instagram, and we would love to hear from you. So thank you for listening, and talk to you soon.
Hold up, friend. Do you love FitMitTuro Fitness Podcast? If so, the best way to say thank you is to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on iTunes. I know every podcaster wants you to leave a review, but it's because those reviews help the podcast to reach more people. I truly want to know what you think, and if this particular episode resonated with you, would you also please share it? Either send a link to someone who you think will find it valuable, or take a screenshot and post it into your social media and tell your friends and family why they should listen it. Make sure you tag me so I can hear your feedback and give you a little love. And if you aren't already following me on Instagram or TikTok, that's the perfect time to hit that follow button. Thank you for being here and listening to FitMitTuro Fitness Podcast.